I've been looking for a while for a production folder from Spyderco in Maxamet to carry. The PM2s had come and gone. Spyderco put them out and then kind of took them off the market. There was some issue that they had with them that they needed to correct, and I had missed out on them. I wasn't real big on a Mannix 2 or a Native. I was kind of holding out, waiting for these to come back out. I was on River's Edge Cutlery's website looking for something else, and I came across this knife for sale. And I wasn't even sure if it wasn't a mistake. I immediately contacted the owner of River's Edge and I said, "Is this correct? Do you actually have one?" And he said, "Yeah, I was holding it for somebody, and they backed out of the deal at the last minute." He'd been sitting on it for like a month, so I immediately bought the knife. In getting the knife, I really wanted to carry it and see how it did with everyday carry and everyday tasks. I wanted to try and preserve the steel because I knew I'd be using it a lot and sharpening it a lot. So in the initial sharpening, I used some DMT plates, but I also heavily used Veneve diamond waterstones. That night, I dulled the knife on on cardboard, cutting up cardboard. I wasn't really paying attention to how much I was cutting. I know it was a lot, but I wasn't keeping track. I sharpened the knife again, put it back in my pocket, and was carrying it. And it seemed as if it went dull that week too quickly. Sharpened the knife again, was carrying the knife again, and I came up on a night where I needed to break down some boxes for the trash. Fairly large size boxes, but I wasn't piecing them down into small pieces. I was just separating the big pieces to get them in the can. And before doing this, the knife was at a very high level of sharpness. I mean, it was hair whittling before this. And after breaking down those boxes, the knife was dull. It would no longer shave hair. At that point, I kind of knew that I had a problem. There was something off with the knife. I sharpened the knife again and was carrying it, and I was trying to troubleshoot what was going on, what the issue was, and I was thinking, different things. I was thinking maybe it had something to do with scratch pattern, and because the testing that I was doing wasn't showing that, but the testing that I'm doing is all push cutting. So I thought maybe if it's the scratch pattern, and the scratch pattern is all spine to edge coming out, maybe the slicing has something having to do with toughness or edge stability. I talked to some other sharpeners who were carrying Maxamet, and some people had said they had a similar experience where the high level of sharpness didn't hold up very long. The working edge did. The working edge was fine, but the high level of sharpness went faster than they expected. And in thinking about what they were using to sharpen, they were mentioning Veneve diamond waterstones as well. It dawned on me that I hadn't used Veneve in any of the testing that I was doing. So I thought maybe it's the Veneve stones, maybe something to do with the resin bond causing carbide tear out or something like that. So I sharpened the knife again with DMT plates, coarse, extra fine, and then a Spyderco ultra fine, and then 4 micron, 1 micron strop. Same as the sharpening that I was doing with the testing. Put the knife in my pocket and started carrying it, and noticed after a week it was still hair shaving sharp. Another week it was still hair shaving sharp. I mean, the edge was lasting at this point. So I thought, okay, well maybe it was the Veneve. So I thought, all right, well let's reverse this thing. Let's reverse the sharpening progressions that I've done, and let's test it. Before sharpening the knife again, I wanted to sit down and do some cutting. I still had cardboard left over from the Rex Maxamet testing that I had done, so I decided to use that. The knife wasn't hair whittling, but it was a very sharp, plenty sharp enough to shave. So I started in on the cardboard, making cuts, kind of going across the full length of the blade as I went down, moving from heel to tip. I was checking the edge every 50 inches or so. The knife cut about 800 inches of cardboard, and it was still running strong. It wasn't slowing down at all. It was still shaving hair. So okay, at least I went through 800 inches. I wasn't really concerned with this knife matching the mule. I mean, River's Edge Cutlery is a Spyderco dealer. I trust where the knife came from, and I trust the materials that they are what they're supposed to be. It's not like I bought the knife on the secondary market. At that point, I might have concern about where it had come from, but not coming from River's Edge. So I said, okay, it's performing fine now. 800 inches after several weeks of carry, that's fine. That's really not what I was seeing in the beginning. In the beginning, it was going dull, very, very fast. So I resharpened the knife using Veneve diamond waterstones heavily, no DMT plates, starting with a 400 grit and making my way up through 2000 grit. The Veneve diamond waterstones are interesting. Now, I like them a lot. They don't cut as aggressively as the diamond plates do. So you're able to get more life out of the knife. It doesn't remove as much steel to do a full sharpening. You also get a finer edge in the end. After going through the progression with the Veneve stones, I moved on to a Spyderco Ultrafine as my finishing stone. I worked with that, and when that was done, I did a 4 micron strop on wood and a 1 micron strop on wood. The edge it came up was extremely fine. It was hair whittling sharp. Really wasn't any issue there. So I decided, all right, well, now let's do some cutting and let's see what happens. So I started in on the same cardboard, checking every 50 inches or so to see if the knife was still hair shaven sharp. And after 800 inches of cardboard, it was fine. It was still shaving hair. It wasn't slowing down one bit. So what that told me was it had nothing to do with the Veneve stones. The Veneve stones are fine, which is good. I mean, I was glad to come to that conclusion. But then what was going on? So I had to stop and ask myself, and I think what the issue was is that the edge was overheated. I mean, it wasn't overheated terribly. It was still taking an apex all right. It just, you had a lack of performance there. I didn't notice any chipping either. Overheated edges seem to happen a lot. You hear about it a lot. You hear guys talking about it a lot. Guys will get a knife in S30V and they'll go to use it and they'll get chips in the edge and they'll post about it. And somebody will say, oh, your edge was overheated, just sharpen it out. And you hear it so much that I'm not sure that that's always the issue. I mean, I'm sure that it happens sometimes, but not all the time. It could be times where it's a matter of how the knife is being used or something like that. I know that I've gotten S30V knives out of the box and pushed it, using the edge, going hard on wood and that kind of thing to see if it'll chip, and not had it happen. So, I can say for sure it's not every knife, but it seems I seem to be running into it a lot. I mean, looking at this knife in Maxamet and then going to the opposite end of the spectrum as far as steel is concerned, this knife is a GEC 54 special factory order from DLT Trading. I got this knife a while back when they first came out from DLT Trading, and I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it, so I just kind of sat on it and left it in the tube. Recently, I decided I was going to go ahead and sharpen it and start carrying the knife. GECs are interesting. They're surprisingly difficult to sharpen. Like I said, the steel is 1095, and they're, as far as I know, they're heat treated by Peters. If you ask GEC, they'll tell you that the Rockwell that they use is 57 to 59. Now, I've heard people say that they took a GEC and Rockwell tested it and got lower scores, but that's an argument that I'm not going to go into at this point. But there are times that I've sharpened GECs and the steel felt soft. And it's typical for me with GECs that it'll take 2 full sharpenings when they're brand new to get them hair whittling. I don't post about GECs very much on this channel, but anybody who follows me on Instagram knows how much I carry them. They're usually part of what I'm carrying on me. I really like them a lot. I really enjoy them a lot. But 2 full sharpenings out of box, and it's just 1095. It's surprising. I never really questioned why. I just knew that they were stubborn right from the jump. And I've tried mixing it up. I've tried doing like 2 full rotations on the coarse stone when they're brand new and then finishing the sharpening, and it doesn't seem to work out. I've kind of concluded that the best course of action for me is just 2 full sharpenings. Don't argue with it. I mean, if you get it on the first one, fine, but expect to do 2. This gave me more trouble than that. This was, I mean, after the 3rd full sharpening, I was kind of wondering what was going on. The edge was gummy and it wasn't forming. I was finishing on a 20K Suhiro and I could run my finger over the edge and there was nothing. There was nothing there. So I reached out to Cliff Stamp and I said, these are the things that I'm seeing with the knife, with the steel, and is this how 1095 acts when it's been overheated? And I also said, how easy is it to overheat 1095? So Cliff got back to me and he said, the things that you're describing with the steel is exactly how 1095 acts when it's overheated. And 1095 is extremely easy to overheat. It doesn't have as much elements in it as more modern steels like S30V with high amounts of chromium and vanadium and moly and tungsten and that kind of stuff that you would find in steels like 1095 or S110V or Maxamet. 1095 is really barren of those kind of things, and consequently it's easy to overheat it on a belt. The other thing that I've recently heard is, this is from a friend of mine who's a knife maker, is that when you're mirror polishing a blade, it's easy to heat it up. Which is interesting because with GECs, there's two main lines of GECs. There's Tidiute and Northfields. Now beyond those two lines, there's some more obscure stuff, but generally speaking, you've got Tidiute and Northfield. Tidiute are rarely mirror polished, if at all, and just kind of less fancy, kind of more the build of a working man's knife. The Northfield are mirror polished, and there's more detail into making them, usually a little bit of a difference in the handle materials that are used. I usually buy Northfield. Northfield is usually what I go for. I don't mind the mirror polishes. I'll typically patina a blade, but I like long pulls and that kind of thing. So Northfield is generally what I go for. This knife took 7 sharpenings that weekend to get the edge to hair whittling, to get it to be able to form a proper apex. I ended up moving from Waterstones to a coarse DMT plate just to help remove material. It was fine. I mean, I came through it okay. I posted about it on Edge Snobs, and there was some discussion there, and I kept the bevel looking the way that I wanted it to look going into the first sharpening, and that didn't get compromised by the number of sharpenings all at once. But it was an interesting little piece of a weekend. Since then, I've been carrying the knife. Did an apple patina on the blade. I'm enjoying it very much, and it's not going to turn me away from GECs. I mean, if I look at it and I say, okay, so fine, so is there usually a problem with GECs? It's not going to push me away from the brand. The quality is high enough and I enjoy them enough that I don't really care. It's something more to consider when I open one up and I go to sharpen it the first time, the idea that the steel may be overheated. I mean, the other thing to consider is with Great Eastern cutleries, they're very thin. They're ground very, very thin. So overheating them is going to be easier because of that. There's simply less steel to distribute any heat that's there across. I mean, in some cases, I've gotten GECs brand new that were 1/3 of a millimeter behind the edge bevel. It's extremely thin. So, but I do like GECs. I do enjoy them very much. But I thought it was interesting to look at two knives that are, as far as steel is concerned, opposite ends of the spectrum. Maybe fair to say opposite ends of the spectrum in other ways, but opposite ends of the spectrum as far as the steel is concerned, both more than likely overheated on the edge, and the difference in the way that the steel behaves kind of makes sense though. I mean, 1095 is so different from something like Maxamet. You're going to have a difference in performance, a difference in the composition of the steel, so it makes sense that if you're having an issue with the steel, you're going to see a difference there as well. Something like 1095 just gets gummy and muddy on the edge, won't form a proper apex, as opposed to something like S30V or LMAX, where it gets chippy on the edge and brittle. But I thought it was interesting. I was curious that I'm running so many overheated edges, but I thought that the whole thing was interesting. And beyond that, I haven't had any issue with the knife in Maxamet, but it made me stop and think, because I've heard other people talk. I've heard other people in the knife community get knives in Maxamet and start carrying them, and then post about it and say, it doesn't have the edge retention I expected it to, or I didn't notice anything special. And I thought to myself, I wonder if it happens more often than we realize, where the edge is overheated and the knife seems like it's falling short, and it's not the steel's fault. It's not the fault of the person sharpening the knife. It just, they didn't take it far enough. They didn't keep asking questions and keep wanting to investigate and figure it out, and all that. It also made me think to myself, belts on knives, knife makers use belts, but it's widely agreed upon as far as the sharpening community is concerned, and that kind of thing, that the best edge you're going to get, not just the sharpest, but the healthiest, the strongest, the best performing edge is going to be off of a stone, whether it's freehand sharpening or you're using a system, Wicked Edge or KME or whatever. But I thought that was curious because, again, it really slapped me in the face. Maybe somebody a long time back who first started saying that, talking about stone sharpening being the best sharpening, maybe they were running into stuff like this or saw it coming, and that's what clued them into first saying it. I needed to sharpen the knife again since all this was done, so I started with a coarse DMT diamond plate, worked with that, and moved on to an extra fine. After that, I threw in a Veneve diamond waterstone 2000 grit to refine the edge a little bit. After the Veneve, I moved on to a Spyderco Ultra Fine and worked with that, and then a 4 micron on wood and a 1 micron on wood. Maxamet takes a hell of an edge, and that's one of the aspects of it that I enjoy. The edge was absolutely hair whittling sharp. Wasn't any issue with it. I'm happy with the model, and I'm enjoying carrying it, just seeing how it stacks up now that things are kind of straightened out with it. So it's a good model, and I'm hoping that Spyderco puts these back out, both the Paramilitary 2 and the Para 3. I think there's a lot of people in the knife community that are looking forward to these being back out again. So it's a good model. Hopefully we see them hit the market again soon.